Hey paddlers, this is Kevin from Urban Paddle. If you're watching this video, it's because you booked a tour on urbanpaddlejc.com. I want to thank you for that. So I'm going to do a brief orientation today. We're here down the docks just before one of our sunset tours, which you may be on. We're going to go over certain things including paddle technique, maneuverability, and also safety issues. We have a great staff here. They're going to go over this stuff with you when you check in at our kiosk before the tour when you get here. But just to really hammer it home, it's good to do this video and pay attention to all my instruction here so that you know what to do and you learn it again. When you get out there, you're going to be a pro. So to begin with, paddling technique. We're going to teach you a lot on the water about how to deal with the marinas. We're here in Liberty Harbor. Liberty Landing is a marina across the way. 2 marinas means more boats. We're going to teach you guys how to get out on the Hudson safely and deal with boat traffic, if we have any at all. We're going to have a safety boat. My guys are lifeguards. They're going to keep an eye on boats, keep an eye on you. But a lot of what we're teaching you on the water is going to be a lot to do with where to go and where not to go, which is also why we require you to do a tour before you can rent. And these are great things you're always going to know and always have in the bank down the road if you're out in the water by yourselves. So for paddle technique to begin with, very simple. Kayaking is a great sport. We also do stand-up paddling tours, as you're aware. And those principles actually apply very closely. They do translate. And that being said, there are only 3 paddles in the sport of kayaking and stand-up paddleboarding. The first paddle is going to be the forward paddle, the power stroke. So we're going to go over a couple different ways of doing that, but I want you to keep in mind that throughout all of this, the most important thing you have to know is to have a proper grip. My guys talk about anytime that we see someone having an issue, it's 9 times out of 10 attributed to them having a bad grip on the paddle. So, what is a good grip? Good grip is hands shoulder width apart. Here are the paddles. You want to pick the middle of the paddle and have your hands dead center. Shoulder width apart. So, what we don't want to see out there are your hands down here. We don't want to see your hands together here. We don't want to see your hands here or too wide. It's essential that throughout the entire tour, your hands are in the middle of the paddle, right here. To make it easy for you, you're going to see these little scuppers when you get your paddles, little rings here. What you want to do when you're at the kiosk is move this ring down on both sides and put your hands in the middle and make sure they are shoulder width apart. Use them as placeholders throughout the trip because they won't move if you don't shift your hands. So move these down to shoulder width apart before the tour. And when you're out there, don't forget, middle shoulder width apart grip is key. Kayaking is a great sport if you do one thing and one thing only: relax. Your paddle should be very nice and smooth. You don't want to paddle high, meaning high frequency. So what I tell people on the water is to not have high frequency, but to have good form. You want to have form over frequency, meaning you don't want to have to paddle a lot. You want to paddle as little times as possible and the most efficiently as you can. The way you do that is by watching me right now. Paddles are going to have a scoop. Easy way, we've drawn arrows on these paddles facing up. These black arrows, goes without saying, have to be facing up in order for the paddle to be the right way. So that is correct. If you don't see the arrows, it's wrong. If the arrows are facing down, that's wrong. Make sure they're facing up the entire trip. Shoulder width apart, arrows up. That's all you have to do as far as holding the paddle the entire time. So back to the 3 paddles. A forward paddle, power stroke, meaning your arms are out. You're paddling from the front of the kayak with the paddle all the way in the water, and you're getting a full scoop all the way back behind you and then taking the paddle out. You need to have a full length paddle. Very important that you don't have a paddle where you're paddling next to you with your arms close like this. Your arms should be out. The correct paddle is perpendicular, not a high angle paddle. This is canoeing. This is kayaking. 1 paddle to each side, nice and smooth. See how my arms are all the way out. So let's go over it again. The forward paddle with a good grip is putting the paddle in at your feet and paddling all the way back behind you and then taking it out. Don't shorten up your paddle. Secondly, that's your forward paddle. You do 1 to each side. If you guys are on double kayaks, both people will paddle on the same side at the same time. The next paddle is your brake and your reverse paddle. So you may hear us when you first get out there telling you to brake or hold up. The way you do it is very easy. The opposite of a forward paddle is the reverse paddle, meaning you're going to put the paddle in behind you, put the paddle in, fully submerged, and paddle from the back to your feet. Back to your feet. So if you hear us say reverse left, think of your left and paddle back to forward. You do not have to flip the paddle over to do that. Keep it the same way. Back to forward is the reverse paddle. And you're going to see that's also going to stop you, number one, but also turn you on the paddle that you decide you paddle on. So if I were to paddle a reverse paddle, it's going to stop me, and it's also going to turn me that way. That's your first way of turning, and also your second paddle. So we have the forward paddle, the reverse paddle, and finally the last paddle is the third paddle, the wide turn paddle. So it's actually called a sweep paddle. What you want to think about, you're paddling forward, you're never going to be able to go straight ahead on course all the time. You're going to have to turn at some point. Because you're going forward, you don't want to have to stop and turn with a reverse paddle. So what you're going to do is a wider paddle on one side. All it is you're going to be reaching out. Don't put your weight outside the boat. All you're going to do is just reach the paddle out from your feet, almost like a half moon to the back of you. Whatever side that you do a wider paddle on, you're going to turn the opposite way. It's a sweep paddle. That is your steering wheel throughout the entire trip. That's how you're going to maneuver and stay on course. So when you get out there, don't forget, arms out, paddle one, forward paddle, each side. From your feet to behind you, then take it out. Reverse paddle and your brake, back to forward, back to forward. And finally, the third paddle, your steering wheel, is going to be paddling on one side, wide.